Welcome back to Overlord Anime Review Special number 2. This one reviewing the 11th light novel of the Overlord series, The Craftsman of a Dwarf. Yep, this is the book where they introduced dwarves to the franchise. And from what I can tell from these people, they are pretty much based upon the versions that were introduced in Lord of the Rings. Those are the only dwarves I can think of when I think of dwarves in fiction. Yeah, dwarves who live in frickin' mountains or underground. They show like how the people live, like they're kind of like their daily life in the way the writer himself explains the the dwarves really well in here. And Ainz goes to visit the dwarf nation, and when he gets there, it's a particularly very odd situation, and they don't even control their whole kingdom. It's controlled by some other force known as the Quota, which is basically a race of frickin' dragons. Which kind of sounds like something out of Lord of the Rings. The dwarves getting kicked out of their own home by dragons. Yeah, just like the way it is in well, mainly in The Hobbit. Well, except that was one dragon. In this book, it was several dragons. Yeah, and Ainz himself goes to visit the dwarf nation. He goes there with Sheltir and Aurora. Yep, and as far as I can tell, I don't think he encounters because I kind of breezed through the last chapter in here, but yeah, he meets the new dwarf introduced in here, goes to his house, brings along some runesmiths, and we also have the big battle with the Cortia. That's the name of the species that took over most of the dwarf kingdom. Yeah, he forms an alliance with the dwarf council. It's like, okay, I'll help you get the rest of your kingdom back if you gave me these runesmiths. Apparently, he developed an interest in them for some reason, and he pretty much just massacres most of them, takes a few dragons under control, takes over the kingdom, has a farewell party for the runes, and then we jump to the epilogue of the book, which is, well, set in Cardiff Village, and focus on Logina, the werewolf maid, and apparently, since in the ninth book, Eri, the village chief, her and her boyfriend got married. And when she's first introduced in this particular epilogue, she is topless. I am not kidding, she is topless. Because Logina apparently spies on her. Yeah, apparently somehow she and her new husband must have had sex because they mentioned that she is topless, because they mentioned bare breast. So yeah, she and her new husband had sex. Okay, and now his grandmother is now, for some reason, they refer to her as her mother-in-law. That is not technically the case, because Lizzie is her new husband's grandmother, not his mother. So why is she referred to as his mother-in-law or mother-in-law? That honestly makes no sense. And apparently he's given up potion making, so he's basically helping the village. Yeah, it's particularly a little weird. So it's like, this is what's going on with them since the end of book 9. So he no longer is making potions. He's basically storing up herbs and helping her run the village. Okay, interesting. I wonder how Ainz feels about this. Yeah, never mentioned here. Excuse me. Also, apparently it's mentioned here that it's been 2 years since the first book happened. Somehow. Yeah, it's something. They don't really acknowledge the passage of time when it comes to particular series. I kind of figure though that some time has passed by the time this book. I was thinking maybe like a year, but not 2 years. I'm sure there's like a lot of stuff I skipped over in here, but it's a good book. And I know there's other stuff that goes on here, like the Shanthracacy. There's stuff going with them and elves. And yeah, but the one thing I was interested in the whole book was the whole thing with the dwarfs. And it's interesting though they introduced it here. And of course the book ends with Logina telling Eri that Ainz has died. Yeah, setting up something that Well, looked up online, that happens in a later book, which I'll get to that soon. hmm This overall was definitely a good book, and unlike the last book, which felt like about three or four different, at least about four different stories, this one felt like a good cohesive story with the side B plot. Yeah, it kind of feels like the way it was with book 9 in a way. It kind of, yeah, it's kind of felt like it had a similar feel to it, because last book was just a series of stories. This one is just, well, also Albedo herself is mentioned. She doesn't physically appear in the whole book. I mean, she doesn't show up like toward the end of chapter 5. Yeah, she's absent in most of the book, which is kind of weird for her because generally she's in pretty much like every single book in the entire series, and yet in this book she's absent for a good period of it, which is kind of weird. hmm Yeah, well, not much else to say. It's just a really good book. Now, I know for a fact that the next book is part 1 of 2, and like in the case of books 5 and 6, the chapters, same numbering, because the next book just has 3 chapters, and that's it. The following book is 4 chapters long, but this one is just a continuation numbering from the previous book. It's the first of a two-parter. hmm Now, in the case of this particular book, I could definitely see this book adapted for at least exactly 5 episodes. Yes, I could definitely see that. In the previous book, 4 to 5 at most. This one, definitely 5, because there's a lot of stuff here, but knowing the anime, they might just shorten it down to about probably at least 4 episodes. I don't think 3. No, I don't think it'll be 3. My personal guess is it probably just either 4 or 5. That's probably what the anime is probably going to do. But I'm sure they're probably going to keep a lot of stuff related to the dwarves in here. hmm Yeah. Now, tomorrow I'm going to be pretty much doing overall 2 videos tomorrow. One, of course, is my first review of Case Closed, and a review of, and this is a second was a possible one, a review of the newest dub episode release for Fairy Tail. That that second one will either happen tomorrow or Tuesday. hmm Yeah, but that's really it for this particular review. Yeah, I I know some stuff I kind of forgot when it came to this particular book, but there's a lot of stuff that happens in this book, and I do mean a lot of stuff. Now I looked up online to see if I may have missed anything from reading this book. Now it is mentioned frequently about the whole thing about Shaltair May confronting the person who brainwashed to attack Ainz. As far as I can tell, I don't think that happens in this book at all. No, but they do have. Apparently, Ainz promised Aurora that she would get a dragon at some point, so they get a dragon under control. Yeah, apparently he's the eldest dragon of all these dragons who took over the dwarf village. I'm sure some people might read this book like, hey, did this writer rip off The Hobbit? Yeah, it seems like this writer took some stuff from The Hobbit, like dwarves being Canada Kingdom by dragons, the fact that they have to basically go back to get gold. Yeah, that's something else also happens here as well. Yeah, and there is no king of dwarves. It's mentioned that pretty much people who had lived in the capital, all but the king himself, have been killed. hmm Yeah, they have various people with various titles like Commander in Chief, Frontier Master. There's a Forge Master, Master of Earth. There's a High Priest who is pretty much their one who's expert in magic. Also, apparently, there's a magic equivalent of AC. Yes, this I thought was quite interesting. I never suspected that they would have, well, a magic equivalent to artificial air, or at least air conditioning. It's quite interesting and quite a neat concept. I kind of wish they would, develop this a little bit more. Now, overall, when it comes to my opinion of the epilogue, it's a good epilogue to the book, but all it is just set up for the next book. That's simply what it is. It's just set up for the next book. But it's nice to see Carnage Village again. I mean, it's been featured very prominently in the first 9 books. The last book, it was remarkably absent. I think it was referenced a couple times last book. But this book, it shows up at the very end, and Ainz is nowhere in the epilogue at all. It's nice to see Logina making her first appearance, as far as I can tell, prominently in a she didn't physically appear in the last book, from what I can tell. No, she was absent. She was there in book 9, but not this book. Nope. Also, it's stated that apparently the village itself was very heavily damaged via the Roramis attacked. Well, I remember seeing the anime, they didn't damage very much. They damaged the gates. But it was more damage done by freaking trolls than the actual army itself. So apparently they decided to merge the houses together. So, yeah. As for Eri, the village chief, marrying her boyfriend, I think this is good. I kind of wish we would have seen this a little more development in their relationship, because I thought the relationship, in my honest opinion, was one of the best things about the show. Heck, the franchise did a fantastic job developing this relationship. And if these two characters who were absent for the last book, they show up in this book, in the epilogue, and apparently they got married, okay. Excuse me. One, when did Naruto propose to us? When did Eri get proposed to? Yeah, that is something. There's a bunch of questions here. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if the anime. I'm hoping the anime, when they get a chance to do this particular book, they at least show the wedding, because it'd be kind of dumb to simply open up like, oh, these two are happily married. But I don't think they're gonna show off this woman's breast, or at least show her topless. Yeah, they might, but the scene itself is, well, it's not shown, like, it's not very long of a moment of seeing her without her top on. But she's an adult, so I can accept it. Yeah. Now, if this was like this for someone who's much younger than she is, then it might be a slight problem. Also, how in the world did the writer figure out, though, that somehow it's been 2 years since the first book came out in universe? It didn't seem like, though, that much time has passed by. That's what it seemed like to me. I would have thought maybe at least a year, maybe a little over a year, maybe even a year and a half, but 2 years? Okay. Yeah, I know it's mentioned in this book that apparently that Naru's parents, they apparently died at some point. Yeah, these two have never mentioned before. Yeah, I mean, there's mention about his famous grandmother, but as for his parents, they've never been mentioned prior to this book. Nope, and I've read every single book prior to this one. But yeah, that is really it, as far as I can tell for stuff in here. Just a really good book. I mean, the villains are just okay. Yeah, but definitely looking forward to the next book, because what I've heard, Ainz can take on some demons. This is gonna be interesting. Okay, so yeah, until I see you next video. Bye.